to the latest episode of We've All Done It. Today, we are going to be focusing on something that this podcast does a lot of: communication. I am so thrilled to have a colleague of mine, Frank DiBartolomeo. Did I say it correctly?
No, but nobody else does it anyway.
Well, you know, that is why we're going to have you introduce yourself, Frank, because I am going to butcher, again, communication gaps. So let's just go ahead and jump in. Frank, tell us about yourself.
Okay, a little bit about my background. I've been around a while, and no, I don't dye my hair gray. I'm a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel. I was an engineer in the Air Force, and after that, I had another 24-year career as a government contractor as an engineer. But I've also been a Toastmaster for over 30 years. And people sometimes ask me, well, why do you keep going back? After 30 years, you should know how to speak well. Well, I learn something new every day. I see something that somebody does that I'd like to incorporate into my speaking. So I've been with Toastmasters for 30 years. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. I'm a professional member of the National Speakers Association and also the founder and president of my company, DiBartolomeo Consulting International. And I have 4 kids. My oldest is 43. Yes, I was legal when I had him.
You're so young, Frank.
I am young at heart. And Mike is 43. He's a director of enrollment at a small Catholic college up in New York State, lower New York State, called St. Thomas Aquinas College. My son, Matt, is 40. He just turned 40. He's my, hope this doesn't offend any of your viewers. He's my Duke basketball buddy. So we text during the games. And, what is that? You'd think that anyway. And then
that might be the first sports reference I think we may have made here.
Well, we did talk about tennis a lot.
I just meant on the show. I don't think we've ever had a sports reference. So that may be a first. Well, I'm sure if we do have anyone's offended, I have no doubt they'll let us know in the comments.
Okay, so well, the next game is tonight. The Duke game is tonight. They blew out somebody on Monday night. Anyway, then I have that's from my first marriage, and I have 2 children from my life marriage. And I call it my life marriage because I truly hope it's going to be life. We're going on almost 29 years. And I tell everybody my wife, Elaine, is an angel. She gets a bye every day, but I'm on probation every day. She is just wonderful. Anyway.
One day I need to meet this woman. That's all I'm
saying. She is just dynamic. She really is. And then my son, Frank, is a naval nuclear officer on an attack submarine, USS Indiana. So he's on his 6-month deployment. So we won't be hearing from him for a while. And my daughter, Jackie, is a journalist on a small newspaper up in Essex Junction, Vermont. Nice. So that's kind of my life. And a lot of people ask me, why do I do this? And it's really about giving back. And if I can help someone succeed, that's all the joy I need. I don't need to have accolades. I don't need to have anything else. I just need to know that I've helped someone, is basically what it is.
Well, I mean, candidly, that you do. But what I would love to know is why specifically speaking? What is it about public speaking or communication? What is it specifically about that holds your passion?
I think there are other people like me. I'm by no means unique, but I'm moved by great speeches, great presentations. You think of, for instance, Abraham Lincoln. He did the Gettysburg Address. Everybody knows that in November. I think it was November 18th, 1963, or 1863. But nobody knows that there was another speaker that spoke first. Do you know who the speaker is? And don't be said you don't know, because nobody else knows either. His name was Edward Everett. He spoke for 2 hours. Abraham Lincoln spoke 279 words, and the Gettysburg Address is enshrined in the great speeches of our country. Edward Everett, not so much. So I enjoy the way people craft words and things like that. Talk about about Winston Churchill's. I think it was in June of 1940 when he spoke to Parliament, and he basically said, "We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the streets. We will fight them in our homes. We will never surrender. That type of thing. Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. Terrific use of pauses to emphasize what he was saying. He was a dynamic speaker, just really terrific. So I guess and also part of it is I come from New Jersey, and I hope this doesn't insult anybody, but we talk a lot, and we get our points across, and there are ways to more eloquently get our points across, whether that be in the words we use, or the body language, or the gestures we use, the pauses, the vocal variety. There's all sorts of tools in the quiver of a speaker. So I just enjoy listening to people and seeing people too.
So did your background in engineering, though, influence it? Because when I think about like your specific background, it's very, very technical. And so I have had the privilege of working with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, strengths and weaknesses all across the spectrum. And I've often found that people who are the smartest, I often think of like the Sheldon Coopers of the world, often struggle the most in being able to communicate those kinds of messages. So when you think of things like engineering, some of those very technical STEM fields, sometimes I think message gets lost because they're not able to communicate in a way that other people can understand. Is that something you've seen throughout your career?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen $1 million and $10 million and $100 million contracts lost because people couldn't convince the people they were talking to their way of thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with, and really for any speaker, to realize that the audience is key. It's not about you, it's about the audience. And the audience, and so before you even create a speech, you need to find out who your audience is. What are their ages? What is their expertise on your topic? Very big thing you need to know. Also, what is their opinion of the topic? That's very, very important. If you don't know all these things, it's hard to give a presentation. And I'll give you an example. Last week, I was speaking at Liberty University. I had 6 different sessions of about, I think it was almost 1,000 students, total. And one of the things I did was I had my slides, and I had talked to the contact, this Dr. Roger Bingham, about it, and about the students, who they were, the project that they were working on. For this particular class, they had to give a 6 to 8 minute presentation with 3 minutes for questions. And there's a kicker. There's 6 people in a group, and everyone has to get up and speak. That is an extremely short time to do that. So I was telling them about, time. I had a high school electronics teacher who used to say, divide and conquer. That's the way we troubleshooted. At that time was car radios, 25,000 volt color TVs. Always keep one hand in a pocket so you don't have a circuit to go through. You may lose your hand, but you won't lose your life. Anyway, so that's what he told us, and that's what I try to do with speeches. I said, decide. I would have no more than 3 points, and I said, assign 2 people to each point, and then time it so that you're 30 to 45 seconds each. Because if you don't do that, what's going to happen when you practice it just by yourself or just in the group, and there really isn't any audience feedback? What happens is you don't get that audience feedback, but when you actually give the presentation, you will have reactions from the audience. You will react to the audience, and that takes time. So they only have 6 to 8 minutes. That's not a whole lot of time. So
yeah.
I had a lot of great questions, and it was a great feeling. The last time I went, I did 3 sessions in April of this year, and I was on the floor of the auditorium. It was mostly in the auditorium. This time I decided to be on the stage, and the reason for that is that I don't think I had enough of their focus on me, not me, the message, and the speaker is the message.
Yeah.
So we had a great time. I gave away my book. I always give away one book, signed book of my book there, Speak Well and Prosper, to every presentation. And that went well. The professors were wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. So that gives you an indication. So getting back to what your question was, I've seen a lot of technical people that can put their point across, but not only that, they don't even realize that the audience is the focus. And that's the key. If they looked at each of their charts and even the words they're saying, it's not just the slides, and think about, okay, how does that if somebody doesn't have an expertise in this topic, how would they understand what I'm saying? Graphics work well, very simple, depending on what you're trying to portray, bar charts or graphs, make a difference. And a picture or a graphic does say 1,000 words and can save you a lot of time. And also, I caution technical people don't put everything in the kitchen sink on your slides, because anything that's on your slide that doesn't pertain to your message has to be taken off the slide. My mantra is, when in doubt, take it out, because you'll distract the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all sat through PowerPoints where it was like a thesis on a slide, which if you expect them to read that and listen to you, I don't think people's brains are big enough to process all that. The other thing that I was thinking of when you were talking, actually I had two big thoughts. One was acronyms are always really dicey. And I will tell a very embarrassing story. I've told this before on somebody else's podcast, but I'll tell it here about how acronyms can get you in a lot of trouble. When I first started working in healthcare, I was shadowing someone in a meeting, and it was a divisional meeting. And they started talking about the ED and the budget for the ED. And it was a lot of stuff, and everything was ED. And all I could think the entire time was I really did not understand that erectile dysfunction was this serious of a problem, that it had an entire division.
Oh my goodness.
And that, they were talking about people, and I'm just sitting there because I'm new. And
who's Ed?
Huh? Well, I knew it wasn't Ed, but in my mind, I thought the acronym that kept being used was ED. And the only ED I had ever heard, because thank you, marketing works, was erectile dysfunction. And so the meeting ends. And fortunately, I'm talking with my coworker, and I say to her very genuinely, like, I had no clue erectile dysfunction was this big, like, of a problem. No pun intended. But like, I didn't realize it was this significant. And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, ED, like this whole conversation. And she looked at me and said, "Kim, emergency department."
Oh, and my goodness.
I said, "That's the emergency room." And she said, "No, the emergency room was within the emergency department." So they were talking about the emergency department. And so the point of this story is, I was so wrapped up in what I thought the acronym meant that I wasn't even paying attention to what needed to be dealt with, because I was so perplexed by what my association was. Now, keep in mind, that person never let me live that moment down. She's like, she ended up telling all the physicians who were in the room because she thought it was so funny. And of course, they thought it was funny. Yeah. It wasn't fun. But it was a hard lesson and a reminder to me always is make sure the people in the room know what the acronyms mean, because again, you don't have any clue what association someone may have. And that can completely derail a message if somebody thinks you're talking about one thing when you're actually trying to talk about
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why you had to make it very clear. In fact, if you have an audience that isn't as technically inclined, maybe as your topic is, you may need to bring up, we talk about the 50,000 foot level or 25,000 foot level. I think most people understand what that means. If you're at the 10,000 foot level and you see your audience is really at the 50,000 or 40,000 foot level, you're going to have to raise up what you say and not necessarily go through all your charts in the detail that you had originally practiced it in.
Yeah.
Because you will lose people. That's why I always say, I always talk about the power of three. Three things in a series are very powerful. either in speech or in written form. And the reason for that, and or in just hearing form on like podcasts, audio podcasts, because it just has kind of a rhythm to it, but it also has another use in that people can remember three things. So when I talk to my clients about creating a presentation, I'm telling them three things, whether it's an hour or whether it's a half an hour, whether it's 5 minutes, whatever it is, because people can remember three things. And I say, mention those three things in the opening, mention them, of course, in the body, and then mention them at the end. It's going to be pretty hard if you're explicit enough. It's going to be pretty hard for people in that audience to forget what the three main points were. And also as a speaker, you can remember three main points. And I keep telling people that never apologize in a presentation. 99, maybe 99.9% of what you believe is not going as well or as planned in a presentation, the audience doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bring it up because it'll decrease your credibility. And number two, it's a distraction for the audience.
Yeah.
And you'll have all sorts of reactions from the audience. Either they'll say, "Oh, okay," or they'll say, "Well, why did he bring that up? I didn't really need to know that." That type of thing. So there's lots of little things that you can do, but knowing your audience is so important, and also practicing. I can tell you because I've done it.
Well, I was going to say, like, I actually give that advice to leaders. So, because you're talking about it in a presentation, but when you think about when leaders have to give complex or unpopular messages to a team, I often say the exact same thing that you are, is know your audience. Like when you're thinking about, like, one, make sure you think about that meeting or that interaction. Like, don't go in like with like cold. Do not do that. But one, think about the person you're about to talk to. Mm-hmm. What do they need to hear? Not what do you need to say, but what do they need to hear in order for this to be a successful interaction? And if you're concerned about it and nervous about it, go practice with a peer of what you want to say and then get feedback on, did that land the way you think it did?
Oh, yeah.
Because so many times, like I've done this with clients that I've worked for, like they know they have to have some really interesting conversation. And I'm like, okay, so how are you going to open it? What's your first line? Give me your line.
Oh, absolutely.
And then they stare at me like a deer in headlights. And I was like, okay, this is the point. So how are you going to like start this? How are you going to ease into this conversation? Like, how do you want to do this? And people, I think, overestimate their ability to wing it. And then they're not, then they don't know why things went so wrong. And then either people are confused, angry, crying, some crazy mix of the three.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, it's that just the concept of thinking through what the other person needs to hear versus what you want to say. And secondly, practice. Those two things alone, I think, are gold with relation to almost every element of communication, whether it's a presentation. Like I think about COVID a lot, like again, working in healthcare during COVID, leaders often had very difficult messages to deliver that their teams were not going to like, that their teams were not going to be popular. And how we had to coach those people, those leaders in that moment, it really determined whether or not how their teams felt about the message. Has a lot to do with how you deliver it.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the Air Force, as an Air Force officer, we get a lot of training in leadership. And many years ago, Hershey and Blanchard, they might have even been the 60s, I'm not sure. But these two guys came up with this idea of situational leadership.
Yeah.
And the way I kind of interpret that is, if you don't know the person you're leading, then you don't know how to lead them. You don't know what their desires are. You don't know what could increase their intrinsic motivation. You don't know. If you don't know who your people are, and it's not like you're trying to pry in people's lives, but let's say you have a young person that wants to move ahead and maybe get into a master's degree program or something like that. If you don't know that, then I don't know how you're going to really lead them.
Yeah.
Getting back to what you said, there's some people. There's a quote that I used in the Liberty University presentation, and it's from Plato, and it says, "A wise man speaks because he has something to say. A fool speaks because he has to say something." There are people like that. There are people that have to say something in every meeting they go to, even whether it's contributing to the meeting or not.
Well, it's because somebody told them that they should, and that's why they're doing it.
Well, that comes back to Frank's, and I'm going to claim this, Frank's Management 101 principle. People do what they're rewarded for.
Correct.
If you don't reward people for certain behaviors, guess what? You're not going to get it. And that makes a big difference. And of course, I have what I call the Great Speaking series. Great speaking is critical to great leadership. Great speaking is critical to great networking. Great speaking is critical to great interview skills.
Yeah.
And the last one is entrepreneurship. Great speaking is critical to entrepreneurship. You can't get away from it. And I'm talking about not only speaking, but all communication is. Because without communication, I mean, that's how we've advanced, over millennia, by using, I think Brian Tracy calls it OPM, other people's money, other people's knowledge, OPK. That's how we learn. That's why you have books on your shelf there, and that's why. No, they look good, so it's important that we are always open to knowledge, that we are lifelong learners. And I always tell everybody and I'm not exiting too soon. In fact, I have a book. It's called The 100-Year Life. I'm studying it very hard. But
nice plug for that author.
Yeah, I mean, Linda Gradden is her name, but I want to be completely spent when I have to leave this world, meaning I don't want an ounce of my knowledge to not be out there and somebody be using it for their success. That's really what it's all about, I think. Anyway.
So I want to take us back because I think this is good. Is you mentioned that you try to go with 3 things. So for people who are listening, what would be 3 things you would want the listeners to know about being a better communicator for technical or complex messages? And I know we've probably hinted at some, but if you had to pick your top 3, what would they be?
Okay, number 1 always is know your audience. We've talked about that here.
Mm-hmm.
Because without knowing your audience, you really have no idea what to include and what not to include. The second thing is make your presentation structured. You're taking your audience on a journey from point A to point B. You wouldn't think of taking a trip from Washington, D.C. to Orlando, Florida without a map or now GPS. Why would you ever think that? Well, I'll just steer myself south and see where it comes. No, nobody's going to do that. So you have to tell them up front what is the map of the journey, which are your 3 main points.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I would say this: practice, practice, practice. We had a saying in the Air Force: we train the way we fight and we fight the way we train. And the analogy here is the way we practice the presentation or speech in practice is the way we will give it in actual. So if you think you can wing that, you're gonna fail every time, because you can't wing things like that if you're trying to move the audience to your way of thinking. And I've already mentioned 3, but another one is purpose. Give your audience why are they there?
Yeah.
And then tell them what you want them to do with the material, a call to action. So that's what I would say.
I like it. So in the South, we would call that a lanyap, meaning like a little extra, a little something, something extra,
Right.
Which I do like, though. I think when, to your point, because what I love about everything you just said can apply whether you're standing on a stage in front of 50,000 people all the way to leading a team meeting of 5 people.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately there should be a purpose to that meeting. There should be call to action after it's over. Otherwise, why are you meeting?
Exactly. And
because we meet a lot in corporate America.
There was a book a number of years ago called The Team Handbook. And in there, it talked about how to put together an agenda. And first of all, have an agenda at every meeting. Without an agenda, you're you're lost. You're
I stopped going to meetings that didn't have them because what am I going for?
right.
Like you have to tell me what I'm going for so I can prepare and show up ready to contribute. So
Right.
yeah, if there was one thing I
Exactly.
could change about meeting culture, it would be that for sure.
Yeah, but this is a gender not quite on steroids, but a little bit above. Have three columns on the right, and one column is discussion, one column is information, and another column is decision, and put an
Mm.
X in the appropriate column for that line item agenda. Because the things that you just need to know about it, we don't have to discuss. And the ones that we have to make a decision on, we have to make a decision on that. So unless you do that, people are not sure where you're coming from with an agenda item.
Yeah.
It's a little, it's over and above. It's the extra mile, but I think it can make meetings um, a lot more palatable to people and a lot more informative. And also, don't give agenda items more time than they're worth.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to know as a leader, and you're basically the facilitator of the meeting, as the leader of the meeting.
Well, that was about to say we could actually have an entire different conversation about meeting facilitation,
Yes.
because that is an art in and of itself. Having done that most of my career,
Oh, yeah.
um,
So you,
yeah, because I was laughing because I was like the other thing that every agenda had always at the bottom was what I call the WWW.
what's that?
Who has said they're going to do what by when? And so that there was an accountability tracking of we have met, we've talked about these things, these people have committed to these things by this date. And then so that there was never, things didn't fall off the plate, if you will.
Yeah, I talk
So
about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know I was about to say I love that though. I love what you were talking about. That's a nice way to approach the agendas as well.
And you can say the calls to action are exactly what you just said. You've heard the SMART acronym,
Hmm.
specific, measurable, so on and so forth. Make things that are not in that SMART or what you described. If you don't have goals or action items with those attributes, then they're basically just things we want to do, but they won't get done. So
That is so
and
true.
and that's kind of the way it is. I talked to my wife. She used to put together this long list of things we want to do around the house, and I said, why don't you put down three things that we should do this weekend? She agreed to it, and you know what? Those three things always get done.
Because your wife's a smart lady.
She is. She's really smart. She teaches math. She's very smart.
We're gonna have to arrange this. I need to meet this woman.
Yeah,
Um,
she's great. She's great.
well, Frank, this has been outstanding. I think that there's something for everybody in this conversation. And I've really loved that you have made it so easy for people to walk away with very actionable things that every single one of us can do. I will ask though, because I ask everybody, is there one last thought or insight or anything that you think that the listener just needs to know before we sign off for today?
I'll quote Winston Churchill. Never, 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 never give up. Success is sometimes just that other side of failure. And it's the people that go the extra mile. You've heard the expression, there are no traffic jams on the extra mile. Just going that. And next time we talk, we'll talk about the winning by a nose principle.
Oh,
Little teaser for next time.
okay. Nice teaser for the next conversation. Love it. So we were going to have a lot of stuff in the show notes, but I cannot end this episode without letting people know that Frank has his own podcast. So
Yeah.
tell them a little bit about your podcast.
Yes, the podcast is called Successful Speaking for Technical Professionals. And what I do is I talk about things not only about general speaking, but also about things that are specific for technical people. Like I have a lot of data that I need to portray some way. How do I do that? How do
Yeah.
I visualize it so I can put it on a chart so it makes it easier for people to understand that. And I'm trying to stay in that vein. Right now, it's just me talking, although I have a friend that did the intro and outro with some music. His voice is much better than mine. But I am going to be interviewing people, and I'm going to be going into video. Right now, it's just audio. But I think you get a lot out of it. They're usually about 11, 12 minutes long. Yeah, it's very exciting. And it's a matter of, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just tried to do it. And gosh, it's up there now.
Welcome to the world of podcasting.
That's right. That's right.
And I also do want to say, like, Frank has a book, which is outstanding. So Speak Well and Prosper. We're going to have links to all of this in the show notes. So I really, really encourage you to go check it out. I mean, tremendous resources. And if there's one thing that along our life journey that should be a continual learning exercise, is how can we get better at communicating to the people in our lives, whether they be personal, work, whatever. So I just really thank you for coming on and sharing your brilliance with us today.
It's been a wonderful conversation, as all of ours are. So thank you so much. I hope to have you on mine, and hope to be back on yours.
Absolutely. Until the listeners, until next time, take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye.